This is Steven Rothberg, president and founder of College Recruiter. At College Recruiter, we believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. Last week, during June 2016, I had the pleasure of delivering a presentation at the annual NACE conference, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. I had a number of attendees, primarily talent acquisition, university relations leaders, come up to me after the presentation, also via email, etc., asking if I could provide to them a copy of the presentation. A lot of the slides in the presentation won't make much sense without also what I say to go along with it. So I thought what I would do is when I got back into the office is record the presentation, post it to our YouTube channel, and then send out the link to those who had already expressed an interest for it. So here's the presentation. Note that if you want to tweet about it or otherwise share it on social media, that would be great. My Twitter hashtag, the Twitter hashtag for the conference is at the bottom of every slide. It's hashtag NACE, N-A-C-E, and then the number 16. So NACE 16. My Twitter handle is at Steven Rothberg, S-T-E-V as in Victor, E-N as in Nancy, R-O, T as in Thomas, H, B as in Bravo, E as in Edward, R as in Robert, G as in Gordon. So few things to just deal with housekeeping. First of all, of course, tweet away. Share whatever content that you would like, good, bad, or ugly. Interruptions are a little bit difficult on a recording, but definitely when I was in person, I encourage that. The PowerPoint, I told attendees to the live presentation, I'd be happy to provide to them a copy of the PowerPoint. That's kind of what we're doing here. I encouraged attendees to complete the evaluation that NACE collects, and also talked about how great of an app they had for this year's conference. Made getting around, finding rooms, contacting people, sharing information really easy. It was very intuitive. And then I also promised attendees that I was not going to do any pitching during the presentation, with one exception. The exception to that is that the next day, Friday, June the 10th, I was going to be moderating a discussion, or moderated a discussion for DeVry University's Career Advisory Board. We had a presentation by Alexandra Levitt, and the event was hosted by Kristen Hall of Google's Education Group, and also in attendance and as a panelist was Madeline Slutsky, who heads up DeVry University's Career Services and Student Services. Alexandra and Madeline are the co-chairs of the Career Advisory Board, and that presentation, the recording of that presentation is now available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/collegerecruiter. In roughly 55 minutes, we went through a pretty interesting conversation about what makes certain job seekers highly effective, and should be of real interest to those who are searching for a job either while they're in school, after they've graduated, or even years after they've graduated, because the differences that the research shows in what makes one job seeker effective versus another ineffective is really driven much more by their actions than by what generation they're in, or even the kind of job they're searching for. So for today's presentation, or the presentation I delivered last week and recording in today, I talked about benchmarking. What we're often asked at College Recruiter by our employer clients, how their program, how their advertising campaign, how one type of metric that they're collecting, how that compares to other employers. And that's basically benchmarking. So I started off by providing a definition that the benchmarking is the process of comparing one's business processes and performance metrics to industry bests and best practices from other companies. So in other words, you don't really want to benchmark yourself against an average organization. You want to benchmark yourself against an organization that's just doing something, whatever that issue is that you're working on, It's doing that really well, and preferably also where you know their numbers, you know your numbers, and then you can really line them up. So, for example, if a company is competing for talent with another company in the same metro area, they're paying about the same, the hiring process is about the same, but your company is only hiring, say, half as many people as another company. If you get 100 applications and you hire, say, two, and the other company gets 100 applications and they hire four, that's a good benchmark. If that company hiring four is a leader in the industry, if four is kind of about the most that you could expect, given that hiring need, then use that four as a benchmark. So if you can get your two up to four, then you know that you're doing pretty well. But if they're at four and you're at two, you know that there's a problem someplace. And by benchmarking yourself against that other organization, you're going to be able to better modify what it is that you're doing. There are three primary ways of looking at benchmarking. You can look at the quality. And one thing in HR is that's very, very difficult to define is quality of hire. Are the people that we are receiving applications from, are they high quality? Are the applications of high quality as compared to those that our competitors are getting or that we would like to see? Are the people we're interviewing of high quality? Are the people we have hired, retained? Quality is a very difficult term to define, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. Another metric or way of looking at things or dimension in terms of benchmarking with recruiting is time. Things like time to hire. How long from the point that you start looking for somebody to hire until that person is actually started? How many days is that? Different positions, different organizations, it varies widely. Again, I'll go into that in more detail later in the presentation. And then cost. HR over the last 2, 3 decades has done a phenomenal job of becoming more and more efficient. The costs of doing things in HR, in processing applications, in advertising openings, in hiring people, those costs have come way, way, way down. But still, when you're benchmarking your program, your hiring need, your process against that of a leader in the industry, cost is a very good way of looking to see if you're doing a good job, if there's room for improvement. Other dimensions or other ways of looking at your process or benchmarks for you to measure yourself against leaders would be what one of our clients refers to as quote unquote performance. Took me a few years to really understand what they meant by that. But what that particular client meant by performance was how many candidates did we get their ad in front of. So if they ran, let's say, an email campaign with us where we emailed African American female accounting majors who were in their junior or senior year at any of these, say, 70 schools that the employer client was targeting, how many of the emails that we sent out on behalf of the client actually were delivered to that audience? The more emails that we could deliver to the client's desired audience, the better our quote unquote performance would be. Some clients will talk about reach. And if you're trying to reach, or if you're trying to get your ad or message in front of a particular audience, what percentage of that audience are you reaching? So let's say there are 100,000 students. If we're able to reach 75% of them, then I suspect that by most benchmarks, that would be very good. But, it just kind of depends. You might be looking to reach high school students at a particular high school. You might be able to reach more than 75% of them by doing a presentation to in the high school where the principal agrees to have all of the students attend some kind of a general session. We see that, for example, with the fundraising that goes on with schools and in some of the military recruiters that do presentations as well. Branding. What percentage of candidates are familiar with your brand, with your organization? What percentage of candidates that are familiar with your brand have a positive viewpoint? One of our clients has spoken about it publicly, so I can as well. But it's the Internal Revenue Service years ago did a presentation with me, and the person who did the presentation said that the IRS has a very, very strong brand. Unfortunately, it's a very negative brand. Most people, when they're thinking about the IRS, do not have the warm fuzzies. It's mostly kind of an unpleasant experience because you're giving them money and sometimes you're even getting audited. So from an employment brand perspective, the IRS needs to overcome some of that. And the way they do that, for example, is that they talk about the IRS being the largest accounting firm in the world and look at all of the different kinds of opportunities you have. Come work with us for a few years out of school. The experience you'll get working for the IRS will be phenomenal. You might choose to stay on for the rest of your career. You might wish to transition into private practice and work for an accounting firm or go into a corporate environment. But whatever, those first few years that you work for the IRS, you will get amazing experience. And so they can take that really negative, that strong but negative brand, and they can turn that into a positive. Market share, your intern to permanent conversion rate. What percentage of your interns both get offers? Do you extend offers to so that upon graduation they'll work for you full time? And then what percentage of interns who get an offer accept that offer? These are metrics, benchmarks that a lot of our clients will use. A lot of clients have absolutely no clue about how their competitors are doing, how they stack up to in terms of how they're doing to as compared to their competitors. And sometimes it's because the client, our employer client, they don't gather any real metrics, or the way that they're doing it is scientifically invalid. Sometimes we'll hear from a client that, well, it's better to have inaccurate numbers than none at all. And most of the time, I would actually disagree. For example, when a candidate goes to an employer's website and applies through the employer's website, they often will see a drop down, and the drop down will say something like, "How did you hear about us?" There was a study, and it's published on College Recruiter, that says that 83% of candidates who identify their source incorrectly. So if you give them a list of, say, 10 different places that they may have heard of you from, 83% of the candidates who look at that list will pick the wrong item. You're better off flipping a coin than having 83% of them give you wrong information. And that's the employers that just really have no clue at all about where their candidates are coming from, or how some metric of theirs compares to metrics of other clients. Unfortunately, it's not an uncommon thing. We see it a lot. It is fortunately, though, becoming less and less common. More and more of our employer clients are gathering really good data and really using good analysis to look at that data and then improve their hiring process. Another benchmark that some of our clients, fortunately in this case a small number, will use when evaluating the effectiveness of their university relations program is whether they, that individual, the university relations manager, the hiring manager, whatever, if they go on campus to do recruiting, do they get to go to their homecoming game for free? I actually had a conversation with a university relations manager probably 5-6 years ago, and she admitted, sort of actually sort of saying it in a she prideful way, that the way that she selects her fall on-campus recruiting schedule is driven by football games, because she knows that if she goes to certain schools on certain dates, if there's a football game on campus the day or two before, the day or two after, the university will give her free tickets on the 50-yard line as kind of a thank you for coming to the school. That's one way of looking at the effectiveness of your program, probably not the best way. Now, circling back to some of the measurements, I talked a little bit earlier about quality. There was a really famous Supreme Court case from, I think it was about 50 years ago, 1964. So Justice Potter Stewart, in a case about pornography, wrote that he knows it when he sees it. Um, the case basically was revolving around obscenity. Was certain pornography obscene and therefore illegal? And it's very, very difficult to create a definition of when some kind of pornography is obscene. If you look at some of the most famous art in the world, like the statue of David, a nude male, very few people would say that that's obscene. Is it pornographic? Well, it shows a naked male, so I think there's a very good argument that it's pornographic. The quality of a candidate, the quality of a hire, is also kind of like that. Hopefully not naked, but most recruiters, when you ask them what makes for a good candidate, what makes for a low quality candidate, what makes for a quality hire, what makes for a low quality hire, the language all of a sudden becomes very, very subjective. So it kind of ends up boiling down to that they know it when they see it. Um, we can work with an employer on a campaign and they can tell us that we need the candidate to come from any of these 70 schools, be a junior or senior, be an African American, be a female, be an accounting and finance student, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we could give them a stack of resumes or a document, a Word document with 50 different resumes in there that all meet those qualifications. A good recruiter in about 10 seconds can have a quick look at that resume and say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. You give that same stack to another recruiter from the same company with the same hiring need, and then these two recruiters are working on kind of the same thing, and I guarantee you that there will be differences. One recruiter will see something in a resume that they like. Another recruiter looking at the same resume won't like that candidate for some other reason. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know it when you see it. So quality at a benchmark is a very, very difficult thing. What one employer views as being a quality candidate, a quality hire, and for very good reasons, another employer for also very good but different reasons might view that candidate, might view that hire as being low quality. So some measures of quality that you can benchmark your program against other programs. One is click to apply. If we send, say, 1,000 candidates to your website, to your career site, how many of those are likely to apply? Very few of our employer clients have that metric, that number. You should have it. The major ATS, and we published this study on College Recruiter, but all of the major ATS report that about 10% of candidates that click to an employer's career site will successfully apply to a job. If you're getting 20%, kudos. You're looking pretty good. If you're getting 5%, there might be a problem. Again, benchmark yourself not against an average employer across all industries, all different kinds of jobs, but benchmark yourself against the leader in your industry, so an organization has similar hiring needs to yours. If you're getting 20% and the leader is getting 30%, you have room for improvement. So that would be the more appropriate benchmark. Apply to interview. If we send 1,000 candidates to your site, 10% apply, so now you have 100 applications. What percentage of those will you interview? This varies widely, but a lot of our employer clients will tell us, again, it's about 10%. So 1,000 clicks turn into 100 applications, turn into 10 interviews. Another way that some of our clients will look at this is the number of interviews per school. If they go to a school and they have a recruiter and say a hiring manager in an interview room all day long, how many candidates are they able to interview? This surprised me that the number seems to vary considerably school to school. Some schools will require you to interview for a longer period of time, say 45 minutes. Maybe they feel like students need more time in order to properly explain their credentials. Fair enough. Other schools, and when I was a student, this was kind of the norm for me, it's 20 minutes. Well, if one school requires you to spend 40 minutes interviewing a candidate and another school requires you to spend only 20 minutes interviewing candidates, you can interview twice as many students at that second school. And for some of our clients, that's an important metric. That's a benchmark that they'll use to evaluate one school versus another. This particular client that I'm thinking of, the more the merrier. The more candidates that they can interview in a particular day, the better it is for them. You, on the other hand, might feel the opposite. You might feel it's better to spend more time with fewer people, and so you would actually prefer the 40-minute time. What your needs are could be very different than what another organization's. Interview to hire rate. Again, that looking at click to apply, apply to interview, interview to hire. This number varies considerably industry to industry. It seems to be driven if primarily by sort of the skill level required for a job. So a really high end, let's say web development position in San Francisco, you are going to see a smaller percentage of people hired than say fast food. But it does vary. Maybe by the time your organization has whittled down the people to interview and you extend an offer, maybe you're only interviewing 3 people and hiring 1. And that might line up very consistently with, say, a fast food operation. If you're interviewing web developers, your best benchmark, though, is not going to be a fast food restaurant. Hires per source. Source could be a school. It could be a job board like collegerecruiter.com. It could be a billboard, could be a career fair. But definitely some of our clients will look at the number of people that they hire per source, and they'll use that as a benchmark to evaluate their programs. Retention. At the NACE conference, I had the opportunity to speak with a university relations leader, and they had recently gone through a process where they looked back 3 years. So looking at the people that they hired in 2013, they wanted to see who is still with us in 2016 and how are they doing on their job, which ones are performing well, which ones are not performing well. And they're going to, and then they used that and they looked back at the sources. Where did we get these people from? And what I think they're going to find is that their best performers came from some of their sources, their lowest performers came from other sources, and then the people who were no longer with them came from yet other sources. That will lead that organization to invest more resources into the sources that are generating candidates who stay with you for the longest period of time, that the retention is good, and whose work performance is the best. Another metric of quality that some of our clients will use is the additional revenue generated by the candidate or after they're hired, or the cost savings, or both. When we talk to candidates, we tell them that more than anything else, when they start working, they need to always, always, always be thinking, if I do this thing, whatever it might be a project, it might be taking a lunch break, it might be deciding what time to get into work, what to wear. Is it going to increase the revenue generated by my employer, or is it going to decrease their expenses, or some combination of the two? If so, that's helpful to the employer. If not, probably something that you don't want to be doing. Yeah, time. That was one of the other dimensions. Some of our employer clients are getting better and better. Many of our employer clients are getting better and better at being efficient in terms of the schools they recruit at and their recruiting schedule. If you're an employer in Tampa, Florida, and you want to interview candidates at, say, 3 different schools, it will take you far less time. You'll be able to squeeze in more schools per week if you interview at 3 different schools in the Tampa, Florida metro area, or even 1 in Tampa, 1 in Orlando, 1 in Miami. Then, if you interviewed at a school in Tampa, and then a school in San Diego, California, and then a school in Fairbanks, Alaska, if you do that latter approach, you're going to spend days just traveling. You won't be able to squeeze in as many schools per week. Therefore, you won't be able to interview as many people. You won't be able to hire as many people. Your cost per hire will go up. Interviews per day. A few minutes ago, I was talking about some schools will require, say, 40 minutes for interviews, some only 20. That's a benchmark that a number of our clients will look at. Hires per month, the time to hire. Time to hire varies considerably. We have some employer clients who, in the initial interview, will extend an offer and that candidate might start days later. Think fast food. We will also have clients that it'll take them over a year from when they start looking to when that candidate starts. These typically are positions that have security clearance issues. If you're working in an embassy abroad or you're working for an intelligence agency or something like that, you're going to find that they're going to talk to your family members, your friends, your teachers, whatever, to find out kind of who you are, if there are any concerns about your background, political leanings, activism, whatever. And that just inevitably it slows down time to hire. But again, if your organization is similar to another organization, a leader in the industry and how they hire people, and you've got a time to hire of say 90 days, they've got a time to hire of say 120 days, probably you're doing a lot better than they are. Recs or requisitions per recruiter is another number that I see used a lot in terms for benchmarking. I'll see recruiters that are looking for to fill say 10 different positions. So they have 10 different requisitions at any given time. And sometimes I'll see recruiters with 30 and sometimes I'll see recruiters with 3. Recruiter with 3 is not necessarily being lazy or underperforming or whatever, as opposed to the recruiter with 30, because the 3 might be diverse military veterans with PhDs. Just much more difficult to find and hire those people than say somebody who, well, again, like a fast food or retail, where those tend to be much easier and faster to hire. We also see hires per recruiter. One of our clients has a couple hundred recruiters that do campus recruiting, and this is a metric that they use, and then they will use that to benchmark their recruiters' performance, not even outside of the organization, but within the organization. So if you've got 200 recruiters and 50 of them are hiring 5 times as many as everybody else, then that's a good benchmark to use. What is it about that group of 50 that are hiring way more than anybody else that is causing them to outperform? What are they doing differently? What skills are different? So you can measure performance not just from your organization to another organization, but even within your organization. Finally, cost. This is where we spent most of the time on the presentation. So traditionally, when we hear about cost being used as a metric or for an organization benchmarking itself against another organization, a lot of times what we hear is sort of a traditional approach to that, which is cost per hire. If you take all money spent on recruiting, including travel, hotels, meals, gifts to professors, everything related to recruiting, and then you divide that by the number of people that you hire, that's your cost per hire. Most organizations that do university recruiting do not use that definition. Instead, what we find is that most of them will use as a cost per hire only the direct costs. If they wrote a check to a school for, say, $5,000 to be at a career fair, and then hired 5 people from that career fair, they'll say that their cost per hire is $1,000. That's part of the cost per hire. That's not their entire cost per hire, because they also had staff time, and they had travel, and they had meals and hotels. You need to add those in. There are a number of organizations that have really good systems that help a lot with that. One that I'm pretty familiar with that has been around for a long time is Yellow. They used to be called Rexaloo, and they've got software that will kind of walk you through and make it very easy for you to calculate what you spent at one school, what you spent at another school, what you spent with one media source like a college recruiter or some other, and then how many people you hired from each, and then you can really see what is working and what isn't working. Even better ways of measuring cost that we see being used more and more is your cost per click. What does it cost you to get a candidate to click through to your website? If you go to career fairs and you require candidates to apply by going to your website, track that. Use a bit.ly link, bit.ly.com, And at the career fair, ask candidates to go to that link. It might be like bit.ly/XYZ, which is the name of the organization that you work for, dot 6-216, which would be like June 2016. In other words, a career fair, the career fair you attended in June 2016. You'll then be able to see from candidates that go to that link and that they're automatically redirected to your career site. You'll be able to see how many candidates click through to your website as a result of them going to that career fair. You're going to miss some because some candidates are going to go directly to your site. They won't go to that bit.ly link first, but you'll probably still get a pretty good handle on it. And then that will allow you to compare the career fair against, say, a job board that you're also using. And you can use kind of equivalent metrics or benchmark the performance of the job board against the performance of the career fair. Other employers will look at the number of interviews. What's my cost per interview? What's my cost per application? What's my cost per hire? But when you look at cost, it's really, really critical that you use the correct cost, or else all your numbers are wrong. And it's definitely not better to have an inaccurate number than no number at all. If it's close, if it's a number that's close to being correct, that is better than nothing. But if it's not close to being correct, you're better off just not having that number at all. So let's go through an example where you can see that using the correct numbers can have a huge impact on what you decide. So let's benchmark two different schools. School 1, you hired 1 student from it. School 2, you hired 2 students from it. At the surface, School 2 is twice as good as School 1, and if you had to choose between this coming fall only going back to one of them, you'd probably pick school number 2. And with just this limited amount of information, the number of people you hired per school, you would be right. School 2 would look better. Let's say, however, that at School 1, the only reason you were able to hire that person is because you went and did a career fair, and that the school required you to sign up for a career fair, and that career fair cost you $500. Well, now your cost per hire at school number 1 is $500. School number 2, you didn't have to spend anything. They had a career fair. It was free to you. There weren't any other costs. It was located across the street from your office. So your cost per hire at school number 2 would be 0. Hey, that kind of reinforces your previous feeling that school number 2 is much better for you than school number 1. Let's throw in a different thing now. Let's say that instead of being across the street from you, school number 2 is actually across the country from you. You had to hop on an airplane, spend a couple of nights in a hotel, meals, etc., and that your travel costs were $2,000. School number 1, however, was just down the street from you. You had $0 in travel. So now school number 1 still has a cost per hire of $500, but school number 2 goes from having a cost per hire of 0 to a cost per hire of $1,000. Well, now which one looks better? Probably school 1 looks better. And again, if you had to pick between one of these, you would now probably be picking school number 1. However, let's say that the people that you hired were interns. And at school number 1, not a single intern that you hired, well, the one person that you hired to be an intern, they did not convert into a permanent employee. Maybe you didn't extend an offer to them. Maybe you extended an offer to them and they didn't accept it. But in any case, your cost per hire is $500. The number of hires is 0. So you have an infinitely high cost per hire. Can't be any higher than that. School number 2. You had still the $0 career fair, a couple $1,000 in travel, but both of the people that you hired as interns converted into hires. So your cost per hire is $1,000. That's now looking a lot better than school number 1 with an infinitely high cost per hire. So if you had to choose between the two schools, probably school 2 is what you'd choose. Now, where can you get more information about benchmarking, metrics, analytics? First place I would go if I were in your shoes would be NACE. the National Association of Colleges and Employers. If you're not a member, become a member. If you are a member, make better use of their membership benefits than you are. I'm sure that there is not a single member out there that is doing everything that they can with NACE, but call them up, email them, go to their website, whatever. They have a ton of research, user groups where career services, employers, affiliated organizations like College Recruiter are active and share gladly, happily. NACE has lots of information that will help you benchmark your salaries, your conversion rates, etc. Another organization that has a somewhat similar mission is SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. And again, if you're not a member, become a member. If you are a member, make even better use of their member benefits like their research. Career service offices. These folks have their fingers on the pulse of dozens or hundreds of different employers. If you're working with a career service office or 10 or 50, reach out to them. Tell them about the issue that you're having and the desire to benchmark your results against others. A good career service office director will be happy to share that information with you, but they will not identify whose stats they're pulling. It wouldn't be fair, for example, for one retail store like, say, Target, to share their information with a career service office who then shares that information with Walmart and tells Walmart these are stats from Target. That would not be cool. Target would be pretty upset with that career service office, and for good reason. Walmart would also be concerned because if the career service office shared information with Walmart about Target, Walmart should know that if, say, Home Depot comes along, that career service office would probably also share information about Walmart with Home Depot. What comes around goes around. But nevertheless, the career service office should be able to say something like, okay, you're recruiting retail managers. We have a number of other employers who work with our office who also have that hiring need, and these are the numbers that they're seeing. And then that'll help you with benchmarking. Industry associations. You hire a lot of people in marketing? If so, join the American Marketing Association. They'll be able to help you. Whatever association is applicable to your industry or to your hiring need. Advertising agencies. There are a couple of dozen, maybe half a dozen or so are much larger and better known than others. If you're working with an advertising agency, reach out. Again, just like the career service offices, just like the industry associations, the advertising agencies have a lot of data around what other clients with similar hiring needs are seeing, and then they can share that information, again, hopefully in a way that does not violate any kind of client confidence. And then media partners, College Recruiter, for example. We have thousands of clients. Most of our clients are Fortune 1000 companies and federal government agencies. We are always happy to share information with our clients about how their numbers compare to numbers that we see from other organizations that are similar, that have similar hiring needs. We can definitely talk with you in terms of benchmarking. Here's what some of the leaders in that space are seeing. To the extent that we know it, we are more than happy to share. And that concludes the presentation that I delivered at NACE last Thursday, June 9th, 2016. Should you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. My direct dial is 952-217-0793. You can email me, Steven@collegerecruiter.com. You can send me an email or connect with me at LinkedIn. Follow me on Twitter, tweet me, send smoke signals, whatever. Happy to help. Thank you.